Peoples of the worldwide federated internet. What's good? Today's going to be more of a kind of free thought episode. I was listening to a message. I posted this story on my Instagram earlier today. I was listening to a message from a preacher, Dan, Leon Springs Baptist Church in San Antonio. If you're looking for a good church to go to, definitely a good church. And he was talking about endurance and running this race with patience. A lot of times messages like that get missed, lost in the minutia of the day-to-day things. I think it gets lost in the minutia of the Christian life. And as he was talking through this topic of endurance, I was encouraged. Because, even believers, we go through battles in our mind. There's things that you battle, back and forth, things that might plague you more than other people, right? Something that I battle with a lot in my life as a believer is doubt, believe it or not. And this is what's amazing. And this is why I identify so much with the children of Israel. God has done so many things in my life over and over again. Right? I'm talking about answered prayer to a level that is unparalleled, back to back to back. Situations in my life where it looked like it was all over, and I leaned on God. God is all I have to lean on always, and He is what I lean on. And I lean on God, and somehow things work out, and we know that somehow is God answering prayer. But as I'm listening to this message, I'm getting encouraged, right? So then fast forward, I go for my walk on the beach. I get home, kind of thinking on some things. I'm going to go lay down, and Grow the Heck Up gets on Instagram Live. If y'all don't know Voss from Grow the Heck Up, I always mention his name. There's people in my life who have encouraged me. There's people in my life who God places people in positions intentionally. My boy Lupe in San Antonio, definitely an encouraging dude. God placed him in my life in like the right exact moment. My boy Peter in San Antonio, right exact moment. All the saints that I encountered while I was in San Antonio, I needed that time. When I tell you I needed that time, like I went to Texas kicking and screaming. I love Florida, but God did some amazing things while I was there. Voss from Grow the Heck Up is one of those dudes I encountered one day randomly watching an Instagram Live of another guy that I followed at the time who passed away. Voss was on there. I recognized him, as a Christian MC. I'd heard his voice before and couldn't place it. And then as he started talking, I was like, that's how I knew of this dude. Wound up connecting with him, having some short conversations. But every now and again, he'll just say things that's like, oh, man. My boy Darius, he's the person who brought me the gospel, right? First clear, concise presentation of the gospel. I would say that I am his son in the faith. Another dude always challenges me when I talk to him with what I think about the Bible. He's one of those dudes that when you think you have something figured out, you talk to him and it's like, oh man, time to go back to the drawing board. Anyway, Voss on Instagram Live talking about neuroplasticity and some other things. I'm going to have to send him a message and get these authors that he mentioned, because I definitely want to look some more into this. And he's mentioned this several times. So he's getting into the what I call the theater of the mind. And he's talking about these things. And it brings me back to a verse that I always cite in the book of Romans. The Bible says, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. How many people ever stop to think God knows everything? Like God is knowledge. God is wisdom. There is no wisdom above God. There is no knowledge above God. So if God told us, instructed us in the New Testament to be transformed by the renewing of our minds, what does that mean exactly? Why did God say this? And some of the things I've also seen on his Instagram live about what people have learned about the brain, what people have learned about the different things that go on in your body as a result of the brain. I always wonder this. I've always wondered about this. People who are sick, who have illnesses, and they've lived with these illnesses, let's say, for years, and they're going on about their life, and one day they go in, I want to get seen about some things. Then all of a sudden, when they find out about whatever said illness is, a couple weeks later they die. Could it be that the despair and the sense of hopelessness that was fostered in their brain actually brought about that demise? Now, I'm not speaking in I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to tell you, one way or another what's true and what's not true as far as that's concerned. But God said, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. The Bible also says in one place that a merry heart does good like a medicine. These things oftentimes sound poetic, and they may just be poetic. They may just be that indeed. I would suffice it to say, I believe that these things are deeper than just poetic statements. I think these are statements of fact, and we learn something about the human body that most people don't want to acknowledge. The mind is more powerful than people think. Now, I'm not going to tell you you can think yourself into being rich and think yourself into being well. I'm not going to necessarily say that. But could your mind affect your ability to overcome a situation and produce a different outcome? Think about people who trust God in faith when things look like they're in their despair. Now, I'm telling you, in my life, now God answers prayer, moves and does things. But there's points in my life where I was in despair and I think, oh, this is going to work out this way and this is going to go like this. And I just don't know. And in those moments where I back up and I go, now, wait a minute. God, I know I can trust you no matter how this works out, no matter which way it goes. I can trust you. Whatever it is you're doing, it is for the good. The Bible says, I believe in the book of Romans, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose, not your purpose. They don't work how you want it to go. They may not go in a direction that you want it to go in, but it's going to work according to his purpose. They work. Somehow things just work. But back to the mind. Sometimes I wonder this about the human brain. Again, going back to the verse in the Bible, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And I often wonder, why didn't it say be transformed by the renewing of your heart? Why not? Why did it not say that? I think the mind, the human brain, is such an integral portion of what goes on in the rest of your body. There's many organs in your body that can be damaged, that can have issues, that you can experience some trauma in, and your body still go on and you recover and you overcome these things. But just think about it. A sudden shock or change in the brain can take a person out instantaneously. What goes on in the human brain as far as the organic process of what happens with the rest of the body, I do not fully understand. But here's the one thing I'm coming to the conclusion of the longer and longer I go on as a believer, that this matter of what goes on in your brain is so much more important and so much more paramount than anybody gives credence, that it matters so much more. The Bible says in the book of Proverbs, and I'm going to try to quote it correctly because a lot of times this verse is quoted. Let me open my Bible app and see if I can find it. A lot of times this verse is quoted and it's, let's see, as he thinketh, excuse me. So the verse is quoted and oftentimes it is quoted missing kind of the rest of the context, although the truth of that verse is still in there. So I'm going to start is in Proverbs chapter 23. I'm going to start at verse 1 and read down to verse 7. I'm not going to switch to my Bible app. I'm just going to read this. The Bible says, "When thou sittest to eat with a ruler, consider diligently what is before thee, and put a knife to thy throat if thou be a man given to appetite. Be not desirous of his dainties, for they are deceitful meat. Labor not to be rich. Cease from thine own wisdom. Wilt thou set thine eyes upon that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings. They fly away as an eagle toward heaven. Eat thou not the bread of him that hath an evil eye, neither desire thou his dainty meats." Why? "For as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. Eat and drink, saith he to thee, but his heart is not with thee." So there's definitely a context with this verse, and this verse is quoted a lot. But the truth of the matter is something is exposed in the context of what's going on in this verse. As this man thought in his heart, so is he. And when you look in the Bible, and when you see that matter of thinking in his heart, this is not necessarily dealing with the organ, the heart. This is dealing with the construct of the mind. What goes on in the mind is really what makes a person up, right? What goes on in your brain is what's going to be carried out in your life. If you're constantly filled with evil thoughts, then at some point, those evil thoughts are going to work themselves out because you're going to act upon those thoughts. If your mind is constantly filled with spiritual things, holy things, how to help people, how to reach people with the gospel, how to walk with God, eventually those thoughts are going to work themselves out in your life. So now I think about depression. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not saying I understand the ins and the outs of this, but I wonder, and after watching this IG live, it re-sparked something that is constantly in my brain. And I'm very glad for this because it was exciting. God is dropping me little nuggets all day long. I wonder how much of what we think on a day-to-day basis is actually what leads to most depression. Now, I know there's many cases of depression that is linked to dietary things, nutrition deficiencies and things like that. I understand that. There's been many studies done on these things, but I wonder how much of these things are actually due to mental conditioning that has never been corrected. And who can correct that mental conditioning? Again, going back to that verse in the Bible, "Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind." Again, this was kind of a freestyle session today because as I watched that IG live and as I listened to that message from Dan earlier today, man, like I said, the wheels were turning. That hamster was going double time inside my head. Like, man, yo, a lot of times, so you ever notice that people who walk around with this dark cloud and always have all of these bad things happen, how much of what goes on in their mind actually leads to decisions that cause a lot of these outcomes, right? So we think these things are disconnected. We assume that what we think is disconnected from what happens around us, when it's actually not so. What we think is definitely connected to what happens around us. So could it be that the outcomes in our life is directly related to what we think in reference to how those thoughts are borne out in actions, right? So think about a person who's always depressed, right? They're always depressed. They never go outside. They stay inside. They sleep a lot. These are all things that are common amongst people who are depressed. Well, what happens when the body is dormant, when it's not active? Well, things begin to break down. So you ever notice how some people, I'll give you an example. This is an example I always think about. Magic Johnson, right? Magic Johnson was diagnosed with HIV. I've always had a conspiracy theory in my head about that, but needless to say he has HIV, right? Believe he actually has it. Now, no doubt he has money and he has access to medications that the average person probably doesn't have access to. But you ever notice when you listen to Magic Johnson talk, he never once sounded defeated. Never once, even when the news came out. He's always active. He's always out. He seems vibrant. The man seems healthier now than he was. When was he diagnosed with that? 20 years ago or so? 20, 22, 23 years ago? I can't remember exactly when it was. Early 90s, I want to say. And that man, every time I see him, I'm like, yo, this dude is like super healthy. I wonder how much of that is due to his mind state. Because again, when you watch him, it never seemed like that diagnosis took him out. Like he thought to himself, this is over. It's like, all right, this is what I got to deal with. Then it is what it is. It's time to work. And I'm not telling you that just because you think good thoughts that, everything's going to be all right. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think having that negative cloud about you, that thought process, it definitely has an effect. And again, brings me back to that verse, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. What is God telling us about the mind, and have we been listening? Y'all know what it is. Stay frosty, people.